The lawyer's breath smelled like coffee and mint gum, and I focused on that instead of the words coming out of his mouth. 6 months. She'd been gone 6 months, and nobody told me. I stood in the parking lot outside the juvenile detention center with my single garbage bag of belongings, watching Mr. Henderson's mouth move, seeing the pity in his eyes. And all I could think was that Grandma Ruth had promised to be here. She'd written it in her last letter, the one I'd read so many times the paper had gone soft as fabric. "I'll be waiting at the gates, Jake. We'll go home together, Mr. Henderson kept talking about the will, about the property value, about complications with the estate, but the words slid past me like water. $2 million. That's what he said the ranch was worth. The land, the house, the horses, all of it. Mine now. I was 18 years old, fresh out of 3 years in detention for a crime I'd actually committed, and I was suddenly wealthy. It didn't feel real. Nothing had felt real since the day they'd taken me away in handcuffs while Grandma stood on the porch crying. The drive to the ranch took 2 hours. Mr. Henderson talked the whole way, explaining legal procedures and probate court and tax implications. His voice became background noise as I stared out the window, watching my own reflection ghost across the glass. I looked different than I had 3 years ago. Harder angles to my face, eyes that didn't quite trust things anymore. Inside, you learn to watch your back, to read situations quickly, to never let your guard down completely. Those instincts didn't just switch off when you walked through the gates for the last time. I watched the landscape change through the passenger window, from the flat industrial sprawl around the detention center to the rolling hills and open sky of ranch country. The transition happened gradually, then all at once. One moment we were passing warehouses and strip malls. The next we were surrounded by open land that stretched to the horizon. The sky got bigger somehow, less crowded by buildings and power lines. This was the land I'd grown up on during summers and school breaks, the land that had saved me from my parents' dysfunction more times than I could count. My parents. I hadn't thought about them in years, had trained myself not to. They'd stopped visiting after the first 6 months inside, stopped returning my calls. Last I heard, they'd moved to Arizona and started over, leaving me behind like I'd never existed. Grandma was the one who visited every month without fail, who put money in my commissary account, who wrote letters full of news about the ranch and the horses and what she was reading. She was the only family that mattered, and now she was gone. Every fence post felt familiar as we got closer to the ranch. Every bend in the road pulled at something in my chest. I recognized the old Miller place with its rusted silo, the crossroads where Grandma and I had once stopped to help a stranded motorist, the creek that ran parallel to the road for half a mile before curving away into the hills. This land was in my blood, the same way it had been in Grandma's, the same way it should have been in Marcus's if he'd loved it for anything other than its dollar value. When we finally turned onto the gravel drive, I saw Uncle Marcus's truck parked in front of the house. Mr. Henderson's jaw tightened. He'd mentioned on the phone that there were complications, that Ruth's brother had contested the will, claimed she'd promised him the property before she died. But the will was clear and recent, dated just 8 months before her death. Everything to Jake, nothing to Marcus. The ranch looked perfect. That was the first thing that struck me as wrong. The white paint on the house was fresh, the porch swept clean, the flower beds weeded and mulched. Grandma had been sick for the last 2 years. Her letters, growing shakier and shorter. She'd written about fatigue, about memory problems, about how the doctor couldn't quite figure out what was wrong, and yet the property looked like it had been maintained by someone in perfect health. Uncle Marcus came out onto the porch before we'd even gotten out of the car. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders and middle, with Grandma's eyes, but none of her warmth. I'd never liked him, even as a kid. He had a way of making jokes that felt mean, of touching things in your room when you weren't looking, of taking up all the air in a space. He stood there, with his arms crossed, watching us approach. "Marcus," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was professional but cold. "We've been through this. The will is legal and binding." Marcus looked past the lawyer to me. 3 years inside really changed you, didn't it, Jake? You look harder, older." I didn't answer. I was looking at the flower beds, at the roses Grandma had planted when I was 12. They were thriving, better than they'd ever been when she was well. Someone had been taking care of them. Someone who knew exactly how she liked things. "This is my home," Marcus said. "Ruth promised me. We had an understanding. You were gone, Jake. You threw your life away with that stupid mistake, and she knew you weren't coming back. She told me this place would be mine." Mr. Henderson pulled out a folder. "We have the will. Signed, witnessed, notarized. Your contestation has been reviewed and denied. You need to vacate the property within 30 days. Marcus's face went red. "This is theft." She wasn't in her right mind at the end. She was confused, sick. She didn't know what she was signing. "She knew exactly what she was signing," Mr. Henderson said quietly. "I was there. She was clear-headed that day. Said it was the last gift she could give to the boy who needed it most." Something passed across Marcus's face then. Something that made my skin go cold. It was there, and gone in a flash. Too quick for the lawyer to see. But I caught it. Fear. Guilt. The look of a man who'd been caught, but wasn't sure if anyone knew it yet. "I'll need to collect my things," Marcus said. "I've been living here 6 months. I have a right to my belongings." "Fine," Mr. Henderson said. "But Jake is moving in today. This is his property now." Marcus looked at me again, and this time I saw calculation in his eyes. "Where you planning to stay, nephew? You got money for food, utilities? Ranch this size doesn't run itself. Maybe we could work something out. I could stay on, help you learn the business, split the profits." "No," I said. It was the first word I'd spoken since getting in the car. My voice came out rougher than I expected. "No deal. No split. Get your stuff and get out." Marcus's smile disappeared. "You ungrateful little shit. After everything I did, taking care of this place, making sure it stayed nice for when you got out. 3 years, I waited. You waited 6 months." I said. "She died 6 months ago." His eyes flickered. Tell. I'd learned to read people inside. Learned that survival meant noticing the tiny things that gave away what someone was really thinking. And that flicker told me that Marcus had expected me to say 3 years, had expected me to believe he'd been caring for the property the whole time I was gone. Mr. Henderson stepped between us. "Marcus, collect your belongings today. Be out by sunset. If you're not, I'll call the sheriff." We stood there in a tense triangle for a long moment. Then Marcus nodded slowly. "Sure. Sunset. No problem." He looked at me one more time. "You have no idea what you're getting into, kid. This place will eat you alive." He went inside, and I heard him moving around, drawers opening and closing, the heavy tread of his boots on the floorboards. Mr. Henderson and I waited on the porch. The lawyer was checking his phone, but I was looking at the land, at the barn in the distance, at the pastures stretching out toward the hills. Somewhere out there, horses were grazing. Grandma's horses. My horses now. "I need to give you some paperwork," Mr. Henderson said. "Account information, deed, insurance policies. Your grandmother was meticulous with her records. Everything's in order." He paused. "She talked about you a lot, especially toward the end. Said you were a good boy who made one bad choice. Said you deserved a second chance." My throat went tight. "What happened to her?" "The letters just said she was sick. They never found a cause. She had symptoms consistent with chronic illness, but the doctors ran every test. Nothing conclusive. She went downhill slowly, then faster toward the end. Marcus was here, supposedly, taking care of her. He called the ambulance when she passed, said he found her in her bed. Natural causes, they said. She was only 68. But these things happen. Did she suffer?" Mr. Henderson's expression softened. "I don't know. I hope not. She loved you very much, Jake. Wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Marcus came back out, carrying 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. He loaded them into his truck without looking at us, then came back for more. 3 trips total. On the last one, he stopped at his truck door and turned back. "Enjoy your inheritance, Jake. Hope it was worth it." Then he was gone, gravel spitting under his tires as he peeled out of the driveway. The house felt emptier, without his hostility filling it, but also heavier somehow, like the walls were holding secrets. Mr. Henderson gave me the paperwork, explained what I needed to do about utilities and property taxes, handed me a set of keys, and left me alone with my inheritance. I stood in the living room for a long time, just looking. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The worn leather sofa Grandma had bought at an estate sale, the bookshelf full of westerns and mysteries, the photos on the mantel, including one of me at 14, holding up a fish I'd caught in the creek. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, the kitchen with its yellow curtains, the bathroom with the clawfoot tub, Grandma's bedroom. That's where I stopped. The bed was made with military precision, sheets tight, quilt folded at the foot. Her hairbrush sat on the dresser, still holding strands of grey hair, her reading glasses folded next to the lamp. The room smelled like lavender and something else, something chemical I couldn't place. I stood in the doorway and couldn't make myself go in. Instead, I went to what had been my room during visits. It was untouched. The same posters on the walls, the same books on the shelf, the same quilt Grandma had made me folded on the bed. I dropped my garbage bag on the floor and sat down. The mattress gave the same way it always had. Through the window, I could see the barn and the pastures beyond. Home. This was supposed to feel like coming home, but all I felt was hollow. Night came slowly. I made myself a sandwich from supplies Marcus had left in the fridge, ate it standing at the kitchen sink, and watched the sun go down over the hills. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. I should have felt something. Relief, grief, gratitude. Instead, I just felt numb, like the last 3 years had burned out whatever part of me was supposed to feel things properly. I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft after 3 years on a thin detention center mattress, and the silence was too loud. I'd gotten used to the constant noise of dozens of other kids, the guards walking rounds, the fluorescent lights that never quite went dark. Here, there was just emptiness and the sound of my own breathing. Around midnight, I gave up and went outside. The air was cool and smelled like grass and horses and distance. The stars were incredible, splashed across the sky in a way you never saw in the city. I walked toward the barn, my feet finding the path by memory. The barn was old, built by Grandma's father decades ago, but solid. The doors were unlocked. Inside, it smelled like hay and leather and horse. I found the light switch, and the overhead bulbs flickered on, revealing exactly what I expected. Tack hanging on the walls, feed stored in metal bins, stalls empty now, the horses out in the night pasture. And there, on the workbench, where Grandma had always kept her tools, was something that didn't belong. A manila folder, new and clean in a space that was dusty and worn. My name was written on it in handwriting that made my chest seize up. Grandma's handwriting, but shakier than I remembered. The letters uneven like her hand had trembled as she wrote. I opened the folder with fingers that had gone numb. Inside were pages and pages of journal entries, handwritten on lined paper. The first was dated 2 years ago. Marcus came by today. Said he wanted to check on me, make sure I was eating right. He brought groceries and made dinner. I felt dizzy after eating. Maybe I'm getting a stomach bug. I sat down on a hay bale and started reading. The entries chronicled 2 years of slow decline, and each one felt like a knife twisting deeper. Dizzy spells, after Marcus brought groceries. Nausea following dinners he insisted on cooking. Confusion that came and went in waves, leaving her terrified that she was losing her mind. And Marcus, always Marcus, showing up to help, bringing food, making tea, insisting she eat and drink everything he prepared. Watching her with eyes she described as waiting. The entries grew more suspicious as time went on, Grandma's handwriting becoming shakier, but her mind, when she was lucid, sharp as ever. I don't understand what's wrong with me. The doctors can't find anything. They've run every test twice. Doctor Morrison says maybe it's just age, that bodies fail sometimes, without a clear reason. But I'm 66 years old, not 90. And this came on so suddenly. 1 year I was fine, riding every day, keeping up with the ranch work. The next I could barely get out of bed some mornings. Marcus says I should sign some papers. Says it would make things easier if something happens to me. Power of attorney, he calls it. wants to be able to make medical decisions, handle my finances, but something feels wrong about that. I don't trust him. Never have. Not since we were kids, and I caught him drowning barn cats for fun. A person who hurts animals without remorse, Mama used to say, is a person who'll hurt anything given the chance. I had to stop reading for a moment. Barn cats. I remembered. Grandma's barn cats. How there were always 3 or 4 of them, keeping the mouse population down. I remembered asking her once why she didn't have cats when she was growing up, and she'd gotten this sad, distant look, and changed the subject. Now I understood why. The entries continued, detailing doctor visits that revealed nothing, symptoms that came and went, Marcus's increasingly insistent offers to help manage things, and then, buried in an entry from 14 months ago, a moment of terrible clarity. I was cleaning out the cabinet under the kitchen sink today, looking for the silver polish, when I found something that shouldn't be there. A container of rat poison, brand new, 3/4 empty. I've never used rat poison in my life. I don't have rats. I keep a clean house. Always have. The cats handle any mice that get in. So why would there be rat poison under my sink? And why would it be mostly empty? I stood there holding it for 10 minutes, my mind trying to work out some innocent explanation. Maybe I bought it and forgot. Maybe I put it there for some reason that made sense at the time. But then I remembered Marcus making tea yesterday afternoon, insisting I drink it all, saying the herbs would help me sleep. I remembered him cooking breakfast last week, serving me himself, watching to make sure I ate every bite of the scrambled eggs. I remembered the dizzy spells that always seemed to come after he visited, after he brought food, after he made me tea, and I felt cold all the way through. My God, what has he been doing to me? I turned the page, and there it was. The entry dated 2 months before she died. I found the rat poison under the sink today. A new container, 3/4 empty. I've never used rat poison in my life. I don't have rats. I keep a clean house. And then I remembered Marcus making tea, insisting I drink it all, saying it would help me sleep. I remembered him cooking, serving me himself, watching to make sure I ate everything. My God, what has he been doing to me? My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the journal. I kept reading. I can't go to the police. I have no proof. He's been so careful, but I'm dying. I can feel it. Whatever he's been giving me, it's killing me slowly. I changed my will today. Everything goes to Jake. Marcus will be furious, but at least Jake will have something when he gets out. At least my boy will be taken care of. I just hope he forgives me for not being there when he comes home. The next entries were shorter, written in increasingly unstable handwriting. I've been documenting everything. Dates, times, symptoms. I took the poison container and sealed it in a bag. I took samples of the tea he's been making me, poured it into jars when he wasn't looking. I've hidden everything in the north pasture, buried it where the old fence post stands near the creek, the one Jake and I used to tie the horses to. He'll remember. If anything happens to me, he'll know where to look. I've left him this journal, so he'll know to look. The final entry was dated 1 week before she died. I'm so tired. I can barely hold the pen. Marcus knows I changed the will. I saw it in his face when he came by today. He knows, and he's angry. I think he's going to do something. I'm afraid. But at least Jake is safe. At least he's away from all this. I love you, sweetheart. I'm sorry I won't be there when you get home, but you'll understand why. You'll find the truth, and you'll do what's right. You always were my brave boy. I sat in that barn for a long time, just holding the journal, reading and rereading those final entries. My grandmother, my sweet, kind grandmother, who'd taken me in every summer, who'd taught me to ride and rope and fix things with my hands. She'd been murdered, slowly poisoned by her own brother for 2 years while she got sicker and sicker, and nobody understood why. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that Marcus had read this journal. He'd lived here for 6 months after she died. He would have gone through everything. He knew the evidence was buried in the north pasture, and he'd been looking for it. That's why the property was in such good condition. He hadn't been maintaining it out of respect, He'd been searching for the evidence Grandma had hidden. The question was whether he'd found it yet. I checked the time on the wall clock. 1 in the morning. I went back to the house, found a flashlight and a shovel in the garage, and headed out into the darkness. The north pasture was a 1/4 mile from the barn, past 2 fences, and down a slope toward the creek. I walked quickly, the flashlight beam bouncing ahead of me, and tried not to think about what I was going to find. The old fence post was right where I remembered it, standing alone about 20 yards from the creek bank. Grandma and I had tied horses there dozens of times, had sat in its shade eating sandwiches and talking about everything and nothing. Now it was just a weathered piece of wood marking a grave of sorts. The ground around it was torn up. Someone had been digging. Multiple holes, some shallow, some deeper, all of them fresh. Marcus had been here, maybe was still here. I spun around, shining the flashlight in a circle, half expecting to see him standing in the darkness watching me. Nothing. Just the night and the sound of the creek and my own harsh breathing. I started digging where Grandma had said, right at the base of the post. The earth was soft from Marcus's previous excavations, which made it easier, but also more terrifying. What if he'd already found it? What if I was too late? The shovel hit something solid after only a foot. I dropped to my knees and dug with my hands, pulling away dirt until I felt plastic. A container. I lifted it out carefully. It was a large plastic storage box, the kind you'd use for Christmas decorations, sealed tight with duct tape. I ran back to the barn with it, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Inside, under the lights, I cut through the tape and opened the lid. Everything was there, exactly as Grandma had described. The rat poison container with Marcus's fingerprints all over it. Jars of tea, carefully labeled with dates. A plastic bag containing what looked like residue from pill bottles. And a letter, sealed in an envelope with my name on it. I opened the letter with shaking hands. Dear Jake, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you found what I left for you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to know about this, have to deal with this ugly truth. You've been through so much already, and now I'm asking you to carry this burden too. But Marcus killed me, sweetheart. I'm certain of it now. He's been poisoning me for 2 years, trying to make it look like natural causes so he could inherit the ranch that should have been his, he thinks. The ranch our father promised him once, 100 years ago when we were kids and Dad was drunk and angry at me for some imagined slight. Marcus never forgot that drunken promise, never forgave Dad for leaving everything to me when he sobered up and made his real will. I've documented everything here in this box. The poison container, with his fingerprints, jars of tea samples, carefully labeled with dates and times, residue from pill bottles I found in the trash after he visited, photos I took of the symptoms, of my shaking hands, of the way my eyes looked yellow and wrong some days, a timeline matching his visits to my worst episodes. Take it all to the police. Make sure he pays for what he did. I know you're probably angry at me for not going to the police myself. You're probably thinking I should have fought harder, should have told someone, should have saved myself. But Jake, you have to understand how sick I was, how confused. There were days I couldn't remember my own name, days I thought I was 20 years old again and looking for a mother who'd been dead for decades. And on my good days, when my mind was clear, I had no proof, not really, just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. A rat poison container that could have been mine, tea that might have been perfectly innocent, symptoms that a dozen doctors couldn't explain. I thought about going to the police so many times, but what would I say? My brother might be poisoning me, but I have no evidence. They'd have thought I was a paranoid old woman, losing her grip on reality. They'd have talked to Marcus, and he'd have put on his charming act, convinced them I was confused and frightened and making things up. And then what? He'd have been more careful. He'd have found another way. So I did what I could. I changed my will, made sure everything would go to you. I started collecting evidence, hiding samples, documenting everything. And I waited. I'm sorry for that, sweetheart. Sorry that I chose to die with evidence rather than live without proof. But I thought, if I died and left you everything, You'd be safe from him. I thought he'd just give up and go away, grumble about the unfairness of it, but eventually accept defeat and move on with his life. If you're reading this, then I was wrong. He's still there, still trying to get what he thinks should be his, still dangerous. Be careful, Jake. Please, don't confront him alone. Go to the police first. Let them handle it. Don't try to be a hero. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you too. I want you to know that I never blamed you for what happened 3 years ago. Not for 1 second. You made a mistake. You got in a fight, and a man died. And that's a terrible thing. But you're a good person, Jake. You always were. You were a sweet little boy who cried when you found a bird with a broken wing. You were a teenager who stood up to bullies even when it meant getting hurt yourself. You were 17 years old and drunk and angry when that fight happened. But you weren't a murderer. Not in your heart. I knew that then. And I know it now. This ranch is yours now, sweetheart. All of it. The land your great-great-grandfather homesteaded in 1887. The house your grandfather built with his own hands in 1952. The barn where I taught you to ride when you were 6 years old. The pastures where we spent so many summer evenings just sitting and watching the sunset. It's yours. Take care of it. Let it take care of you the way it took care of me. And Jake, please try to be happy here. I know that sounds like a strange thing to ask, given what you're going to have to deal with first. But after all the legal mess is sorted out, after Marcus is brought to justice, I want you to find joy in this place. Raise horses like we always talked about. Plant a garden. Fall in love with someone who understands why this land matters. Build a life that's full and good and worthwhile. You were the best thing in my life, sweetheart. From the first summer, your parents dropped you off when you were 5 years old, scared and quiet, and so desperate for someone to love you. I loved you then, and I loved you every day after. Every summer you spent here, every school break, every weekend visit, and these last 3 years, every letter you sent, every phone call we had, just made me love you more. You grew up in that place, became a man, and I'm so proud of who you became. I wish I could be there when you get out. I wanted that so badly. Wanted to see your face when you walked through those gates. Passion. Wanted to hug you and tell you how proud I am. Wanted to bring you home and watch you heal. But I'm running out of time. I can feel it. My body is failing faster now. Marcus knows I changed the will. I saw it in his face when Mr. Henderson mentioned it casually last week. Marcus was here for coffee, playing the concerned brother, and Henderson stopped by with some papers for me to sign. He mentioned in passing that he'd filed the new will, that everything was in order, and Marcus's face went white, then red, then blank. I knew in that moment that I'd miscalculated, that changing the will hadn't protected me. It had just given him a deadline, so I'm leaving you this, all of this, the evidence, the truth, the ranch, the chance to do what I couldn't. Stop him, make sure he pays, and then, when it's over, live, really live. That's all I want. That's what all of this is for. I love you, Jake. I loved you from the moment I met you, and I'll love you beyond the grave. You were my boy, my brave, sweet, troubled, wonderful boy, and you deserved so much better than the hand life dealt you. I hope this ranch, this gift, makes up for some of that. I hope it gives you the foundation you need to build something beautiful. Take care of yourself, sweetheart. And remember, be brave and be kind. That's all anyone can ask. All my love, always and forever, Grandma Ruth. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Long enough that my face got puffy and my chest ached. Long enough that the words on the page blurred and I had to wipe my eyes to read them again. She'd known what was happening to her, and she'd been too weak and sick to fight it, and all she'd cared about was making sure I was okay, making sure I had something when I got out. A sound outside made me freeze. The crunch of gravel, footsteps. The barn door creaked open, and Marcus walked in. He looked different in the harsh overhead light. Older, desperate. He saw the box on the workbench, saw the journal in my hands, and his face went dead white. "Jake," he said. His voice was careful, controlled. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night? Reading, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. Learning about what you did. Marcus took a step closer. I saw you from the road. Saw the barn lights on. Thought maybe you were having trouble sleeping. First night in a new place. Thought I'd check on you. Liar, I said. You came to dig. You've been digging for 6 months, looking for this. I held up the poison container, looking for the evidence that proves you murdered her. His expression changed. The mask dropped, and what was underneath was something cold and calculating. She was going to die anyway, he said. She was old, sick. I just helped things along, and she was supposed to leave me the ranch. We had an agreement. But then, you got arrested, and she got sentimental. Started thinking you needed saving. Changed everything right at the end. You poisoned her for 2 years, I said. I was standing now, the box between us on the workbench. 2 years of making her sick, making her weak, making her think she was losing her mind. It should have been mine, Marcus said. I was here. I took care of this place while you were off being a criminal. I deserved it. He took another step closer. And it still should be mine. You're just a kid. What are you going to do with a ranch this size? You can't run it. You don't know the first thing about business. Sign it over to me, Jake. We can say Ruth was confused at the end, that the will was a mistake. You're young. You'll bounce back. But this land, it's in my blood. I picked up the poison container. I'm going to the police. Tomorrow morning, they'll test this, test the tea, and they'll find out what you did. You're going to prison, Marcus, for murder. His face twisted. You self-righteous little punk. You think you're better than me. You killed a man. That's why you were inside. You took a life over a stupid drunken argument. And you think you have the right to judge me? He wasn't supposed to die, I said quietly. It was a bar fight. I hit him once, and he fell and hit his head. It was an accident. Marcus laughed. A harsh sound with no humor in it. Accident. Right. Just like Ruth's death was an accident. Just like me being here tonight is an accident. He moved fast, grabbing for the box, but I was faster. I shoved it behind me and grabbed the shovel I'd left leaning against the wall. Don't, I said. Don't make this worse. Worse? Marcus's eyes were wild now. Worse than murder charges? Worse than life in prison? He lunged for me, and I swung the shovel without thinking, catching him in the shoulder. He howled and stumbled back, and I ran. I ran out of the barn into the darkness. The box clutched against my chest and headed for the house. I could hear Marcus behind me, cursing, his heavy footsteps pounding the ground. I made it to the porch, fumbled with the door, got inside, and slammed it locked just as he hit the other side. The door shuddered. Marcus was screaming now, incoherent with rage. Open the door, Jake. Open the fucking door. We can talk about this. We can work something out. I was already on the phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. I need help, I told the dispatcher. My address is 4772 Ranch Road. My uncle is trying to break in. He killed my grandmother. I have evidence. Please send someone. The dispatcher kept me on the line, kept talking to me, but I barely heard her. I was watching the door, watching it shake every time Marcus hit it, wondering if the old wood would hold. And then I heard his truck start, heard the engine roar to life, and he was gone, taillights disappearing down the driveway. He ran, I told the dispatcher. He's in a blue Ford F-150. License plate, I don't know. He's running. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later. 3 cars with lights flashing. I met them on the porch, still holding the box, still shaking. I told them everything, showed them the journal, the evidence, the letter. Read them Grandma's words about what Marcus had done. They put out an alert for Marcus's truck, set up roadblocks on the highways, and they took my statement, recorded everything, photographed the evidence. A detective arrived an hour later, a woman named Ortiz, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She sat with me in the living room and asked questions, writing down every answer. Your grandmother was a smart woman, she said when I'd finished. She knew what she was doing, leaving you this trail. And you did the right thing. calling us instead of confronting him. I did confront him, I admitted. In the barn. He tried to grab the evidence. Detective Ortiz nodded slowly. Self-defense. You protected yourself and the evidence. That's not a crime, Jake. She paused. We're going to need to exhume your grandmother's body. Test for the poison. It's been 6 months. But tissue samples should still show traces if it was chronic exposure, like she described. Will it hurt her? I asked, then felt stupid. She's already dead, but Detective Ortiz understood what I meant. No, she said gently. It won't hurt her, and it will help us put away the man who did this. That's what she wanted. That's why she left you all of this. They caught Marcus at sunrise. He'd driven 3 counties over and holed up in a motel, but someone recognized his truck from the alert. He fought the deputies who came to arrest him, which just added assault charges to the murder charge. Detective Ortiz called to tell me they had him in custody, that I was safe now. The next few weeks were a blur. The exhumation. The toxicology reports that confirmed chronic arsenic poisoning. The arraignment, where Marcus pleaded not guilty, despite all the evidence. The media attention when the story got out about the grandmother murdered by her brother, the juvenile delinquent grandson who'd solved the case. I hated that part. They made it sound like a TV movie, sensational and tidy, when it was just grief and rage and the hollowness of knowing someone I'd loved had suffered. The trial was 6 months later, and those months in between were some of the hardest of my life. I had to keep living in the house where Grandma died, walking past her bedroom every day, sleeping in a building that felt haunted by her absence and Marcus's presence. I hired a cleaning service to come through and deep clean everything, to scrub away any trace of him. They found more evidence in the process. A second container of rat poison hidden in the garage, pill bottles in the trash that tested positive for arsenic compounds, even residue in the tea kettle that Grandma had noted Marcus always insisted on using. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia Morales, built an airtight case. She brought in toxicologists who explained how arsenic poisoning mimics natural illness, how it's called inheritance powder, for a reason. She had Grandma's doctors testify about the mysterious symptoms they couldn't explain. She had handwriting experts verify that the journal was authentic, that it was genuinely written by Ruth Henderson over a period of 2 years. She had me. I had to testify, had to read sections of Grandma's journal aloud in court, while Marcus sat there stone-faced at the defense table. His lawyer, a public defender who looked about 12 years old and in over his head, tried to argue that the journal was fabricated, that I'd written it myself to frame Marcus and keep the property, but the evidence was overwhelming. The handwriting analysis, the dated entries that corresponded with doctor visits and Marcus's truck being parked at the ranch, the physical evidence, poison containers with his fingerprints, tea samples that tested positive for arsenic, the progression of symptoms that matched chronic poisoning perfectly. The hardest part was reading Grandma's final entries, the ones where her handwriting got so shaky I could barely make out the words, the ones where she talked about being afraid, about knowing death was coming, about hoping I'd forgive her for not being strong enough to save herself. I had to stop twice, my voice breaking, while the judge waited patiently and Marcus's lawyer objected that this was theatrical and prejudicial. The judge overruled him. "This isn't theatre," she said quietly. "This is a woman's last words. We'll hear them." The defense tried to paint Grandma as senile, confused, paranoid. They brought in a psychiatrist who'd never met her to speculate about how illness might cause delusions. But then the prosecution brought in Mr. Henderson, who testified about meeting with Grandma to change her will. She was sharp as a tack that day, he said, knew exactly what she was doing. Told me she had to protect Jake from Marcus because she feared what would happen after she was gone. Said her brother had always been greedy, had always resented that their father left everything to her. They brought in neighbors who testified about seeing Marcus's truck at the ranch multiple times a week, about how he'd started spending more time there right around when Grandma's health declined. They brought in the hardware store clerk, who remembered Marcus buying rat poison 2 years ago, remembered thinking it was odd, because everyone knew Ruth Henderson didn't use poison on her property. They brought in Grandma's best friend, a woman named Eleanor, who cried on the stand, talking about how Ruth had confided her suspicions, but had been too scared to act on them. And they brought in the forensic pathologist who'd examined Grandma's exhumed remains. Her tissue samples showed levels of arsenic consistent with chronic exposure over at least 18 months, he testified. The concentrations were highest in her hair and nails, which act as a timeline of exposure. The poisoning was deliberate, sustained, and ultimately fatal. Marcus's defense rested on the argument that there was no direct evidence. No one had seen him put poison in anything, no confession, just circumstantial evidence that could be explained away. His lawyer argued that anyone could have been poisoning Ruth, that Jake himself had motive and opportunity during visits. But the timeline destroyed that argument. I'd been in detention for most of the relevant period, and the poisoning had continued throughout. The jury took 3 hours to convict. Murder in the first degree, premeditated, malicious, calculated. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, Marcus didn't react, just sat there, staring straight ahead, like this was happening to someone else. But I saw his hands. They were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white, and they were shaking. Detective Ortiz found me after the verdict. She put a hand on my shoulder. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. "You got justice for her." But it didn't feel like justice. It felt empty. Grandma was still dead. Marcus was in prison, but that didn't bring her back. All I had was the ranch, the land, the memories of summers that felt like they'd happened to someone else. I lived in the house for a year before I could bring myself to change anything. Every item in its place felt sacred, like moving it would erase another piece of her. But slowly, gradually, I started making it mine. I hired help to work the land, used some of the money from the estate to buy more horses, to fix up the barn, to plant new gardens. I finished my high school equivalency and enrolled in community college, studying business and ranch management. The ranch became profitable again. The horses drew buyers from 3 states. The land produced hay that sold at premium prices. I hired local kids to help with the work, kids who reminded me of myself, who needed somewhere to belong. Some of them were trouble, had records or problems at home. I didn't care. Grandma had believed in second chances, and so did I. I kept her journal in a safe in my bedroom. Sometimes, on bad nights when the guilt got too heavy, I'd take it out and read her words. She'd been so strong, even at the end, so determined to protect me, to give me something worth having. I tried to be worthy of that. Tried to be the person she'd believed I could be. 5 years after that first night, I stood in the north pasture at sunset, looking at the memorial I'd built near the old fence post. A simple stone with her name, her dates, and the words she'd written at the end of one journal entry. Be brave and be kind. That was Grandma. Brave and kind, even when she was dying, even when she knew what was happening to her. The land stretched out around me, golden in the fading light. This place had saved me twice. Once, as a kid who needed an escape from a broken home, and once as a lost young man who needed a reason to believe in himself again. Grandma had given me both, had given me everything, including the truth. I visited Marcus in prison once, 2 years after the conviction. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see him powerless, locked away. Maybe I needed to say things I hadn't been able to say in court. He looked smaller in prison, orange, diminished somehow. He didn't apologize, didn't express remorse, just looked at me with flat eyes and said Ruth made her choice. Yeah, I said. She chose me, and she was right to. I never went back. There was nothing there worth seeing, nothing that would make me feel better or worse. He was just a broken, greedy man who'd killed someone I loved, and he'd spend the rest of his life paying for it. That was enough. The ranch became my life. I dated occasionally, had relationships that never quite worked out, because I couldn't explain the weight I carried. How do you tell someone that you own your home because your grandmother was murdered and left it to you? How do you explain that some nights you still wake up smelling lavender and chemicals, remembering the journal entries about dizziness and confusion? But the land itself healed something in me, the work of maintaining it, the rhythm of seasons, the simple satisfaction of caring for animals and growing things. Grandma had known what she was doing when she left me this place. It wasn't just wealth or security. It was purpose. It was home. I'm 23 now. The ranch is thriving. I've expanded into cattle, bought the adjacent property when it came up for sale, hired a full-time foreman so I can focus on the business side. People call me a success story, the kid who turned his life around. They don't know about the nightmares, about the guilt that still creeps in when I'm alone, about the anger that flares up when I think about those 2 years Marcus spent slowly killing the woman who'd raised me. But they also don't know about the peace I've found here, the way the sunrise looks over the hills, the sound of horses nickering in the barn, the satisfaction of building something, of honoring Grandma's legacy by making this place everything she wanted it to be. I hired a woman last month to help with the bookkeeping. Her name is Sarah, and she has a smile that makes the office feel less lonely. She's asked me twice to tell her about the ranch's history, about how I came to own it. I've deflected both times, not ready to share that darkness with someone new. But maybe someday, maybe when I trust that she won't look at me differently after hearing it. Tonight, I'm sitting on the porch where Grandma used to sit, drinking coffee and watching the stars come out. The house is quiet, but not empty. Tomorrow I have meetings with cattle buyers, equipment to repair, a dozen small tasks that make up the running of this place. It's a good life. Hard, but good. I think about that first night a lot. Standing in the barn, reading Grandma's words, understanding what Marcus had done. The fear and rage and grief all tangled together. If she hadn't left me that trail of breadcrumbs, he would have gotten away with it, would have sold the ranch, taken the money, and never faced consequences for what he'd done. But she'd been smarter than him, braver. She'd made sure the truth survived, even when she didn't. The journal is still in the safe. I'll never get rid of it. It's evidence, yes, but it's also a testament. Proof that she loved me enough to fight for justice, even from beyond the grave. Proof that she believed I deserved a second chance. That one mistake didn't define my whole life. I was 18 when I inherited this place, angry and lost, and convinced the world had nothing good left to offer me. Now I'm 23, and I understand what Grandma was trying to give me. Not just land and money, though those things have value. She gave me the chance to be someone worth being, to take the brokenness inside me and turn it into something purposeful, to honor her memory by being the kind of person she'd believed I could become. Some nights, when the wind is right, I swear I can smell her perfume, lavender and something sweet, like the sachets she used to keep in her dresser drawers. And I'll stop whatever I'm doing and just stand there, breathing it in, remembering the way she'd ruffle my hair when I was little, the patient way she taught me to rope, to ride, to fix things with my hands, the letters she sent while I was inside, never judgmental, always loving, always certain I'd find my way back. I did find my way back, Grandma, I whispered to the empty air. I came home, and I'll take care of this place. I promise. For as long as I live, I'll take care of what you left me. The stars wheel overhead. The horses are quiet in the barn. And here, on this piece of land, my grandmother died to protect. I am finally, truly home. Not because of the property, or the wealth, or the success, but because I know, with absolute certainty, that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. This is what redemption looks like. Not dramatic or cinematic, just a young man on a porch, drinking coffee and making plans for tomorrow, building a life out of the ashes of tragedy. This is what love looks like when it survives death. A ranch, a journal, a trail of clues leading to justice, and a boy who became a man by proving that his grandmother's faith in him was justified. The night grows deeper. I finish my coffee and stand, stretching muscles sore from a day's work. Tomorrow will be busy. There's always work on a ranch this size. But tonight, I'm just grateful. Grateful for the second chance. Grateful for the truth. Grateful that Grandma loved me enough to make sure justice was served, even if she couldn't be here to see it. I go inside, lock the door, and head upstairs to the bedroom that's finally starting to feel like mine. The journal is in the safe. The ranch is quiet. And somewhere, I hope, Grandma Ruth is resting peacefully, knowing that her sacrifice wasn't in vain, knowing that the boy she saved is taking care of the land she loved. If you ever inherit something unexpected from someone who loved you, remember this. Look for the truth they might have hidden. Trust that they knew what they were doing, and honor their memory by becoming the person they believed you could be. That's what I'm trying to do. Every single day, and on the good days, I almost feel like I'm succeeding.